Alrighty, I think that's 3 o'clock. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us today for the next instalment of our reflection series for 2021. As an insolvency practitioner, I do like to look at the learnings that come about from businesses or ventures that can find themselves in distress in order to advise others on how to attempt to mitigate against making similar mistakes in the future. And in the same vein, I like to look to my colleagues, contacts, and friends to hear what they've learnt from their different experiences, as I think it builds towards a wealth of knowledge. And this is why in this series, I'm talking with a number of esteemed and accomplished individuals to see what 2021 has meant to them, the lessons that have learned, and what might be ahead for 2022. So today I'll be speaking with Stacy Miller of Cronin Miller Litigation, and we'll bring Stacy in now. Hi, Stacy.
Hi, Alice.
Lovely to see you.
You too.
Welcome. And Stacy obviously is my co-host in Insolvency Bites, and from all accounts, I think, Stacy, it's been a pretty busy 2021 from you. We've obviously been doing Insolvency Bites together. We've done a few legal life seminars, I think, this year. I know you've had quite a few matters on the go, and aren't you also your girls' netball coach?
Yes, sorry, a little bit of mum duties in there as well amongst all that. It's been a really crazy year, like 2021, and I'm sure lots of people are saying it after 2020, the year that was. Everyone was hoping this year would be a little bit more subdued. Perhaps we were still suffering or experiencing the aftershocks of COVID, but still just so busy. And really crazy with all the extra things that have been thrown at us while we are trying to deal with those COVID-19 aftershocks. I think I started the year with really high energy, and I don't have that energy right now. I'm not going to pretend I do. Anyone who knows me will know I give it to you straight, and if I'm not feeling something, I will let you know. So yeah, I'm a bit tired. It's like my kids at the end of the school term, they get really feral and a little bit tantrumy, a little bit of attitude. I'm feeling that way now.
Not throwing too many tantrums, I hope.
Yeah, a couple of tantrums. But yeah, no, it has been a really busy year. I've loved doing some Insolvency Bites with you, Alice, and I'm really looking forward to doing them more and on a more regular basis because they sort of started, didn't they, to sort of address what was happening throughout COVID and all those temporary measures that were being introduced by SERPO. I don't has that taken on yet?
Stacey's coined phrase of SERPO. I did hear somebody else use it once, and I felt very delighted for you that it obviously made it out there.
Absolutely. And can I tell you, I sat on an expert insolvency panel last week at Bond University for the insolvency class, and in front of a bunch of students, I was talking about the Coronavirus Economic Response Omnibus Act. And I said, but we call it SERPO in the industry. So perhaps it will actually catch on because we've got a new generation of lawyers coming through. They're going to use it.
But starting with that, I think it is really interesting because you look at the energy we did have at the start of the year, and I agree. I think everybody's a little bit burnt out coming into the end of the year. We had a number of crystal ball predictions as to how 2021 would go. I don't think any of those actually came into fruition. We thought we'd have everything would take off in terms of small business restructuring, and that's sort of been a little bit of a non-event, sort of to say the least. We didn't see as many insolvencies come through. We've obviously had, and we've been very lucky here in Queensland, but our sort of colleagues in New South Wales and Victoria haven't been as much. So there's been a lot of restraint, I think, from some of the major creditors in terms of their how they're conducting their debt collection. And I think it's only really now that we're starting to understand what that might look like. And now we've got Omicron to try and figure out, if there's going to be any adjustments to that. So it's been a year of uncertainty. And I know that, for one, I do not like uncertainty. I don't think that the economy really likes uncertainty. I'm not sure you like a lot of uncertainty either.
No, I'm not a big fan of that. I mean, I like anything that keeps me on my toes a little bit, but I also like to be able to prepare for it so I can tackle it head on and without too much stress involved. But look, yes, you're right. There's the uncertainty and all these things that we've sort of been waiting to happen. Thank goodness they didn't, because I haven't had time for that. You know, my firm's in that enviable position where, because we practice in commercial litigation and insolvency, we're always super busy in one area, if not both. So yes, it's been a little bit slower in the insolvency industry because there's been these moratoriums and there has been this uncertainty. There hasn't been this take up on the small business restructuring and even safe harbour, because there just hasn't been that pressure on that industry to do so. But on the flip side, there's a lot of cash out there. There's a lot of money, and litigation is really a discretionary spend.
Absolutely.
So, you know, it has been busy on that front. What we've seen a lot of this year has been shareholder oppression claims. So business disputes, typically within a corporate structure. And I feel like that's a COVID aftershock as well. Either they've gone through a bit of a high period in terms of being propped up by government packages and what have you, or the stress of downturn in business has killed off that spark that you have between partners, potentially. But there's been a lot of business breakdowns and partnership bust-ups, which we've been dealing with. But you know what? You need money to engage lawyers. So that's why I say it's still out there. But on the flip side, insolvency has been slow. But exciting things happening in insolvency. I mean,
it is quite exciting.
Over the last 18 months, some of the legislation that's been passed and the industry commentary, and now we're talking about 1-year bankruptcies again, potentially, and all these things. It's a fun time to be practicing in this area of law. All the lawyers out there who might be interested. And that's what I did tell my bond students last week. Yes, of course you want to be an insolvency lawyer. Why wouldn't you want to be? It's very exciting.
It's a really fun time to be an insolvency lawyer. I will put a pin in some of that excitement as an insolvency practitioner who you never want to be the test case. That's the problem. We've got all of this legislation that's come through, or changes in regulations and these sorts of things. And everybody's, you know, well, this is how we think it'll be interpreted, or this is how we think it should go. And the last thing you want to do is be the, you know, Ruhe versus in the matter of. And, you know, so for us, there's a heavy reliance on our legal team to be able to sort of try and figure out what is meant, where we're sitting, you know, the benefits and the disadvantages of certain situations. So it is ever changing. I think it's quite interesting. I think everybody thinks there was an ATO wind up last week or the week before, and everybody was like, oh, it's happening. And I've reminded a few contacts that I actually did get an ATO liquidation back in May. Didn't mean that the floodgates opened. I think so. Hate to break it to you, but I do think, and we'll talk about 2022 in a little bit, but I do think you're right. We have turned a corner there. So if we're looking at 2021 though, can you think of your major milestones? Was it a bit of a just come again year, or, you know, what milestones have you hit in 2021?
It's just been the strangest year. Do you know, we actually started with a milestone for the business, 15 years.
Wow.
Derek, my business partner, Derek Cronin, came back to the Gold Coast after having worked in Brisbane, which is where I met him at a firm many years ago. And we celebrated 15 years of establishment of the firm. Of course, it rebranded a few years ago to Cronin Miller, but it was actually a really fun way to start the year. We had a celebration here in Surfers Paradise, and I know that many of our colleagues and friends of the firm couldn't make it because there was a snap lockdown that weekend in January. So Alice,
I know, I wasn't there. I was there in spirit.
Yeah, but it was fun. So that was a milestone, and the business has been going really well. It's we've got a team of 12 lawyers, which is we just do commercial litigation and insolvency. So that's the largest commercial litigation team on the Gold Coast, and we're very proud of that. And we've got a good, strong team of lawyers. But in terms of my milestones, business milestones, yes. Personal milestones, I've probably not focused on enough this year. Actually, this year was the first year, I think, in almost 20 years, probably more actually, that I sat down on New Year's Day and made New Year's resolutions. I'm not a New Year's resolution person, but one of my good friends who's also a lawyer really strongly believes in manifesting your goals. Is that how you say it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yourself. So I go walking with her quite often, and we've been talking about that. So on New Year's Day, I sat down and I wrote out just 3 to 4 goals for the business, financial goals, and personal goals. And I then checked in on myself in September, the end of September, I think it was, and I had smashed my business goals out of the park. Done. Oh, I met those ages ago. I should have got some more. Financial, done. Really happy with myself. Tick, tick, tick. Personal, oops, not a single one. They just had been completely abandoned. I'd abandoned them along the way, and had lost focus on what they were. And I really looked at them and thought, okay, can I achieve these in the next couple of months? I was like, no, I can't. So isn't that interesting? It's, in order to achieve those other goals, I actually had to focus on them to the detriment of my personal goals. So that was a little bit of a shock to me, to be honest. And it's actually made me realize that I let some things go that I shouldn't have, and I need to focus more on what my priorities and my goals are next year, and just generally as well. That's a product of how busy it has been. We've had, the COVID aftermath, the growth of the business, different demands from clients because of how they're responding to COVID as well. And that takes a lot of time and energy and focus. So yeah,
it's not easy taking on other people's sort of feelings and emotions and issues, which as a lawyer you would do necessarily all the time as you listen to that and you assist with processing that. At risk of sounding like a broken record, because I did mention this on the matter with Nicole on Monday, but I was listening to something recently and they were talking about how, you shouldn't try and do everything all of the time. And there's sort of more of a seasonal basis to how we deal with things. And whether it is, this is the time now that I need to work, and that I throw everything into work, or whether this is the time now that I need to deal with, personal life or health or family or whatever that is. And trying not to judge each of those categories when you're in the throes of doing the other. So you've obviously had a massive year from a sort of business and financial point of view. That's great, and celebrate that, because I'm sure if you look at other years and you look at years to come, and you'll have great personal, achievements. And I'll call you on that in a minute, because I think you've done quite a lot in terms of your, sort of your personal and family life as well. But, look at that, go, okay, that's fine, but that's what I needed to do now, and how our ecosystem is run because of that. And then when you're on holidays and you get your break over Christmas, don't worry about, what's happening at work. And that's a lot easier said than done, obviously. But I think it's interesting because we think that we need to be all things to all people all the time. And if we drop one of those, you get the plate spinning in the air and one of them falls off, then we're an absolute failure. And we don't acknowledge how great we were at all the things that are still spinning. So I think that's interesting. But saying that though, you've been involved a lot. I know that your beautiful daughters are very involved in sport, and you're, as you said, you're the netball coach. I know that you've had quite a lot of efforts driving to and from, touch football games or netball games. We're not dropping the ball there at all. So sometimes maybe paying attention to all the amazing things.
Thank you for that. look, I think we're our harshest critics, aren't we? And mum guilt is a real and terrible thing. And I'm one of those people where, do as I say, not what I do, because I'm really bad at taking my own advice. You're right. I mean, I've got, the problem is for me this year, I feel like I've blinked and I've missed it. My eldest is going into high school next year and my youngest is going into prep. And I had a birthday party for her last weekend. Her birthday's on the 20th. So just to sort of round out the little pre-prep year with her friends. And I hadn't met, I think only 2 of the parents that came had I met all year of drop-offs and pickups, although my husband does most of them. And I hadn't sort of done that. I think that just happens with the last child anyway. But you're right. I mean, the girls are very busy, and I like to be involved with that. I do coach my middle child, her netball team, and I take time out to do that. And, that if that means I have to get up at the crack of dawn to do it a couple of extra hours work before they wake up, then I make that happen. And it's just what you do, I think, to try and balance everything. But I agree with what you say about it really is just being in the moment, isn't it? And one of the things I have always said is that the way I achieve balance is not trying to spend equal times amongst my competing interests, but when I'm at work, I'm focused on work. When I'm at home, I'm focused on, my husband and my kids and doing things. And when I'm having me time, I need to be focused on that and not thinking about work or thinking about family pressures and things. That's how I achieve balance, by being in the moment. And actually, you're right, I haven't done that this year. I've lost sight of that a little bit. So that's a good little goal for me next year, just to remind myself to go back to that, what I've always sort of tried to ascribe to, my way of being balanced.
Absolutely. And I think it's different for everyone. We might need to have another one of those spa days to make sure that we're all balanced.
Oh my gosh, that was amazing. And I love how it was a work day, because,
That's right, absolutely. Of course. So, and we might have already touched on some of this, but the challenges that you faced during 2021, was there anything else that you wanted to sort of have that chat about there?
Look, I think from a business perspective, you've got your everyday business challenges. I think that, again, we're also sick of hearing about COVID, but there have been after effects of COVID that we have had to settle into. And I know it's nothing like what's happened in New South Wales and Victoria. We are so lucky, obviously, in Queensland to have been able to live the way that we have. But we've moved to a more hybrid type work environment where we have people at home for 2 or 3 days a week and then in the office the other 2 or 3, which comes with its own little sets of challenges. So we've been settling into that. And, it's been an interesting challenge to keep. I find it more difficult to keep my eyes, metaphorically, on how everyone is going when they're out of the office and then in the office and you're busy. So that's something that I'm still trying to work on and focus on and make sure that everybody has actually settled into a new routine in a happy way. As I said, we've got a team of 12 at the moment, and I can genuinely say that the team of lawyers we have, they like working. I love coming to work. I love doing what I do. And it always surprises me a little bit when people say, no, I don't love it. And I was like, really? What are you doing? Go do something else then. So we had turnover this year. And I think staff turnover for any business is a real challenge. And again, I'm forthright with these things. I love talking to other business owners. I love talking to other managers. And being very real about what these challenges are and how to deal with them. I get very attached to my employees, so sometimes it hits me harder than I think it does. I've got some other, again, colleagues who are like, Stace, just take a step back and prioritize priorities, balance, all that sort of thing. But so that's presented some challenges as well, but in a good way, because it always leads to growth. Always.
Absolutely.
Growth. So I'm really actually excited about 2022 and how I'm going to approach that differently to how I approached this year.
Oh, fabulous. I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit about that.
Oh.
And so with those challenges, they are quite, they're large challenges, they're significant, and they affect the business as well in the way that we do business that we used to. I think staffing is a big issue at the moment. I know that we're definitely, struggling to find staff. I know that there's a number of other professional services firms that are as well. So I think that there's significant challenges that are reflective across industries. But
yeah, and I don't know. Have you experienced the Great Resignation? Have you heard about the Great Resignation?
I've heard about it. We've not experienced it. I think our issue is more. So back in 2017, things were going pretty well in the economy, and that was through that period that insolvency firms in particular did not take on a lot of grads. So we probably took on maybe 50% as an industry, not just as a firm. And you get that natural attrition. And sort of when you're then sort of 5 to 7 years post, we've had some people, even in this climate, who have left to go overseas. We've had some people that have gone into in-house, with the banks or whatever, or into other consulting roles, which you would get that anyway, but you'd still have somebody left at that level. And we're just finding now that sort of level is really hard to find someone who sort of has that level of experience. So, whilst it hasn't necessarily been the Great Resignation, it's been very notable in terms of the lack of the staff levels that you want. And we're dealing with that by putting on more grads, and training them up and understanding that you just need to do that for now.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting period. Yeah.
It is interesting, and I agree. Accountants I talk to, recruiters even, but then across various disciplines of law as well, everyone is experiencing it. So I don't know where it's come from or why we're all experiencing it at the same time, particularly here on the Gold Coast as well. We seem to be, I have heard it's happening in Brisbane. It's definitely not just unique to down here, but I would have thought there'd be heaps of people flocking to the Gold Coast now that they've had these remote working practices and we saw a bit of that last year, a bit of, Melbourne and Sydney lawyers coming up this way, but not so much this year.
Yeah, and I think you are doing that, but because we've got the hybrid, I've actually met a few people who are now working in Brisbane, but for Melbourne firms.
Right.
And so they've actually continued to be able to be with the practice that they were originally with, notwithstanding that a spouse had moved or there'd been some other reason that they needed to move. So that's an interesting concept as well, and how that might affect the overall sort of market, talent pool that we can look at.
Yeah.
What about lessons, Stacey? Have you had any sort of epiphanies, lessons learned in 2021?
Look, it's a personal lesson, work-related, which is that I can't do everything. And it was a hard lesson for me to learn, and it will be harder for me to continue to acknowledge that and not try and take a step back up. But I have been implementing it over the last, probably about the last 8 weeks, to make sure that I sort of don't create in 2022 a replica of 2021. And it means having a bit of faith and trust in my team, which I do 100%. But it's all well and good to say it. I need to, give them the opportunities to step up as well. And they will, and they have, and I see it happening. And I'm really actually excited for them as well, as they grow and develop into the roles that they're taking on. So that will make it easier for me to achieve my personal goals that took a back seat this year. And also help them to achieve their professional and business goals as well as their own personal goals. So it's a win-win. It's a win-win situation.
Fabulous. No, that's awesome. I really like that. So that was 2021, and we're thinking of new visions and changes and goals and etc. Are you planning on doing your resolutions for 2022?
I am. Yes, I think I have to, because I can see how they can be successful by doing it a certain way. And I want to see if I'm such an overachiever. I need to achieve them all at the same time.
I don't know anyone else who needs to achieve the right way of doing resolutions for what they would like to achieve in the near future.
That's right. I think for me, I need to be a little bit more realistic. But I set those goals for, by the end of the year, I want to have achieved this. And really, and I'm sure there's whole courses and seminars and people present on how to, goal setting and all that kind of thing all the time. And I just have never been the type of person that would sit down and listen to one of those seminars or presentations. Maybe I should, but I will. And I'm taking a fair bit of time off in January, which I have never done. I think the longest annual leave I've taken has been like 8 days at a time, other than when I have had children, which is maternity leave, not really annual leave, or when I got married. So I'm taking a lot of time off in January to sort of reset and recharge. And, when you own your own business, you don't distance yourself completely. So you never completely switched off. Christmas, New Year is a great time for lawyers to take holidays, and probably for you as well, and accountants, because clients are also on holidays at least for a week. If I take a week off in July, which I do every year, I still get calls. Oh, I know you're on leave, but can you quickly look at this and look at that? There's a bit of a lack of respect for the holiday period if it's not over a festive season. So I find that Christmas and New Year's really when I get to switch off. And so I'm just going to extend that into late January and give myself time to start the year right.
Excellent. There is a thought, well, not really a thought, but a tradition in some of the more Indigenous religions or Indigenous cultures that actually say that first part of the year is really just about being. So, people talk about hitting the ground running, when they come back, and it's like, no, you don't hit the ground running. You actually then just be, and you sort of have a very sort of yin vibe in terms of, okay, well, what does the year want with me a little bit? And sort of to be able, they say reflecting, is what we're doing now, is the first step of that. And then just sort of being for a little bit. And then sort of basically by February to say, okay, good, this is what the plan is. So I think that's probably really smart way for you to start the year.
I absolutely love that. And that's what I'm going to do.
Oh, fabulous. No, that sounds really exciting. And lots of more insolvency bias.
Yes, I have more time for that, and I want to do more of that. I really enjoy that, and it's all part of my priorities for next year to prioritize things that I enjoy. And I'm lucky that things that I enjoy actually are things that I get to tackle in business and at work. So again, I can make all that work for me.
Yeah, no, we are really lucky in that respect. I agree with you, and it's lucky. I think I'm very thankful that we get to do that and explore that with people. That we actually have very similar visions and values with to be able to work together. Stacy and I, you and I have had a really good relationship for many, many years, but this is probably one of the first years in the last little while when we've had a lot together to be able to work through, and that's been wonderful, to be honest, both from a file basis and also from a information distribution basis, which has been quite good. Incidentally, I think it's our Legal Wise for March has just been put up if anyone's interested. Stace and I are doing with a couple of others doing our Legal Wise seminar panel in March, I think. So that's
if you like listening to us chat. There's a lot of chatting that goes on.
There is a lot of chatting that goes on. So thank you so much for your time today, Stacey. I think we could talk for another hour, but I think we've only allocated half an hour on these ones. Yeah, we'd turn it off. That's right. Look, it's been really fabulous. It's wonderful to speaking from so many different points of view. I think it's always nice to check in and understand that others have similar feelings to what you feel as well. It makes you feel a little bit more healthy about how we're all going around. So I hope you have a good break and you're able to recoup before coming back for 2022. Won't say hit the ground running before emerging
after I be for the first month.
That's it, exactly. And thank you to everybody watching us today, or who might be watching us a little bit later. Join me again tomorrow. I'll be talking to Radhika Kanhai Cornwall for her reflections on 2021. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you later.
Thanks, Alice.